Good day, brothers and sisters. Thank you for tuning in again into Alex and Sass Show. Alex Sass Show with Glenn Herring at the Glenn Zone. And may something amazing find you today, or you find something amazing in your life. Maybe you win the lottery. Maybe you get a new job. Maybe you get a new girlfriend. Maybe you get a new car, a new house. Something really good happens in your life today. Everything that you desire, everything that you plan and set forth, it comes true today. Glenn, what is coming true today for you?
I don't know. And maybe Canadians, wake up to what's going on.
Well, actually, it's the whole world needs to wake up soon. Today, we're going to talk and discuss the, everlasting Ukrainian war, because it's not enough of it. And it's escalating now for real to international level. UK is highly invested, so is US, and nobody's hiding it anymore that it's a conflict only between Russia and Ukraine over some border and resources situation and Russian imperial expansion. It's obviously not, and we'll show you what evidence for that is, because it's not even evidence. Everybody just speaking out loud about that. And in the previous episodes, we shown Newland talking about it, and Senator Graham saying it's the best money taxpayers ever spent in Ukraine, right? But today we're going to talk about which money Chinese government spends in Canada and for what purposes here in Canada. And we are a Canadian show, as you can tell, Oh, Canada. Glenn, are you proud to be Canadian after this news?
Yeah, Canada is still a beautiful, a great country to live in. We're very fortunate to be here, and we're also doing our share to help Canadians to wake up, to ensure that the future stays that way also.
Okay, let's watch this. Let's not prolong.
The list of MPs briefed by Canada's spy agency is growing. CSIS has informed Conservatives Michael Chong, Erin O'Toole, and now New Democrat Jeany Kwan that they have all been singled out by the Chinese Communist Party.
CSIS had reached out to me.
Kwan says she can't go into details about how China is targeting her, only why.
The reason why I'm being targeted is because of my activism in support and to fight for basic human rights.
Opposition parties returned to the House and repeated their calls for a public inquiry, something former Governor General David Johnston ruled out last week.
The Prime Minister appointed a family friend and Trudeau Foundation member to investigate, more like cover up.
The Conservatives can continue to malign Mr. Johnston despite the fact that he has distinguished public service, which was recognized by a former
distinguished public service does not account for conflict of interest.
Yeah, and he has a distinguished private service, friends with the Trudeau family, and also a member of the Trudeau Foundation.
Well, that is the conflict of interest. And Trudeau Foundation had received money, which they said return, and which, okay.
Conservative Prime Minister and Stephen Harper.
Johnston plans to hold public hearings into
Okay, did you see Jagmeet Singh's face? Now he actually has to act upon it.
It looked like he saw an ET, an extraterrestrial there.
Who's that, Justin? No, Justin's not an ET. He's an ET
no,
probe.
He's a Muppet.
Oh, also, Erin O'Toole came out, and he came out, well, out of closet. He didn't come out of closet, but he actually also admitted that he was compromised by Chinese or approached by Chinese or whatever it is. But why now? Let's watch this video for a second.
Erin O'Toole threw that election, big guy.
That I also believe my privileges as a member and officer of Parliament were infringed by the government's unwillingness or inability to act on intelligence related to foreign interference. The briefing from CSIS confirmed to me what I had suspected for quite some time, that my parliamentary caucus and myself were the target of a sophisticated misinformation and voter suppression campaign orchestrated by the People's Republic of China before and during the 2021 general election.
Why now, Glenn? Why is he coming out now?
He's talking about the People's Republic of Trudeau, actually. If you ask me, when I was watching him, it looked like he threw the election. I mean, that was for the Liberals to win, and he just threw it. And I mean, it was for the Conservatives to lose, and he purposely lost it. And now it looks like he seems to be switching allegiances because everything is coming out. So he's realizing that the good is winning. And as also other members of parliament, people in the government are switching allegiances because looks like the bad is going down. Things are starting to be exposed. And you wait, people. You're going to be very, very surprised and very, very disappointed in your so-called democracy when you find out what's really been going on for a long time.
Glenn, okay, so it's been going on for a long time. Do you think this war in Ukraine and our global efforts to protect the Western democracy in Ukraine, is it really a distraction to distract us from what's going on at home, specifically here in Canada? It's a perfect example here. I mean, our neighbors down the south, they have their own trouble, they have their own problems, but everybody's using the same thing to distract us, all of the Western, EU and everything else. By the way, we have a footage from the ground in Ukraine. Brothers and sisters, check it out. Hold on. Looks like a war zone, right?
Yeah, or Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup.
Oh, this is not Ukraine. This is France, Glenn.
I guess it looked like France won the World Cup there.
Well, the point is like there's turmoil everywhere else in the world, throughout all of the Western society. All of the Western countries and democracies experiencing unrest in one way or the other. And you just saw it with the France. Cars are flipped over and burning, and it looked like a war zone for real. And I think some of the places in Ukraine look less scary than this right now. But what really is scary, Glenn, is now they continue to threaten us with some nuclear stuff. And maybe there are some weapons involved because now UK and US are trying to bring more weapons into Ukraine, longer ballistic nowadays range missiles. And I believe those missiles are capable of carrying nukes. My thing is, it's also, remember that nuclear plant in Zaporozhye? That the Russians took over right away, and now they're protecting it. That's been a target now again. The thing is, it's probably always been a target in the past few months, etc., past year or so. But now it's back in the news. Are we meant to feel scared for some reason?
Nothing but fear mongering. Let's look over there. By the way, it looks like Russia is starting to put their foot down on the neck of Ukraine. What people don't understand is Ukraine has never really been recognized as its own sovereign state. So you would think in realist ways, this looks like more of a civil war, and it's being propagated by the West. Champ, let's face it. United States of America hasn't won a war in, over half a century. They lost in Vietnam. Okay, they lost in Iraq because, look, they're not even respected there anymore. And now they've also lost in Afghanistan. They're always fighting wars in other places of the world, and they never really win. They just throw money and weapons, and then it goes back to normal. Who pays for that? Taxpayers of the United States of America. And when the tax dollars can't cover all these excursions, these expenses, then they print more money, and again, the taxpayer pays through inflation. Welcome to the wild, wild world of the West.
Glenn, you sounded like a perfect conspiracy theorist, except we have people like Riccardo Bosi, and he's the Australian Special Forces commander. And let's listen to him for a moment.
I've mentioned this a couple of times, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but it's important. A lot of people haven't heard it. What's going on in the Ukraine? First of all, it's a massive distraction. They're trying to distract you away from what's really going on in everybody's home country. Now, the Ukraine is this is not what you think it is. The Ukraine, let's get technical first. The Ukraine is not a sovereign state. It does not have internationally recognized sovereign borders. It's still part of Russia, has been since the 10th century. How about that?
Well,
How
it's
about
not
that?
it's not what you're just saying. I mean, this information is publicly available and people will argue till the death. And what I'm saying, this show is like not built on, oh, this is Alex's and Glenn's opinion. No, that's why we pull up all those articles and play all those videos and you say, well, that's just another side of the story. There's the other side of the story. Maybe so. Maybe so. There's another side of every story, but we're not the only ones that actually have possession of this information and can think for ourselves. So let's
The more point of views, champ, the better. That minimizes the chance of being propagated into a belief system.
even if this guy is wrong and we are wrong, we're exposing you to information other than legacy media, mainstream sources, which we know for a fact is sources of propaganda, indoctrination, and what do they call, press releases for the powers.
The lamestream media.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, lots happen in between. We understand that. But this is like Russia invading Russia. That's all it is. Now, second point. The Ukrainian
That was very racist what he just said, according to some people.
people are very upset, particularly the Ukrainians in Australia. I get it. But guess what? You've been lied to, just like the Australian people have been lied to. We think we're a sovereign nation. We're not. The Ukrainians think they're a sovereign nation. They are not. See, the truth is slowly going to come out about what's really going on. And what's really going on in
Well, there's two ways you can look at it. Okay, if Ukraine is not a sovereign nation according to legal documents from centuries ago, and that the Ukraine does not have recognized borders after the Soviet Union fell apart, none of them being approved by international bodies, including EU and Russia. Russia did not sign off on that. But it's also, in talks about sovereignty, like we can do IMF, for example. When your government signs up with IMF, you sign off your sovereignty, right? You no longer can make sovereign choice regarding your immigration, regarding your resources, regarding your pricing of your commodities, etc., right? Here we know for a fact Ukraine received so much money and other assets that they have to somehow be accounted for it, right? They have a responsibility to the powers they gave them all this. So I'm sure the decisions, not I'm sure, I know for a fact, the decisions that they make are not sovereign decisions at this point.
He was saying that Australia is not a sovereign country. Let's guesstimate who is running Australia besides IMF or all these globalists. What would you say?
Well, it's still Commonwealth, right? That's
Commonwealth, like Canada,
Yeah.
right? And Canada has to have a Governor General,
Yeah.
and the Governor General reports to
The Queen, and Governor General is the person who
The
can
king now.
disband
King now, right?
No,
and
them.
the monarchy.
Well, I think his pronouns are them, so I don't know if it's
all of them.
But-
And so then they tell the Prime Minister what to do in a so-called sovereign country of Canada.
And Governor General is the person who can disband the Parliament, and it did happen in Australia before. It did happen. I forgot what year it was, but it did happen. So yes, that's
Just
the ultimate
on
power.
a side note, champ, it's funny, all those, let's say, ex-empires of England and the monarchy, the Commonwealth countries. How come all these Commonwealth countries have no gold or very little gold in their central bank? I wonder where all the gold went.
Quinn took it with her to her planet, reptilian planet. I don't know. I don't know. You got me, champ. Let's continue listening to this blog.
is this. The Ukraine has been the center of the globalists for decades and decades and decades, 70 years at least. CIA, which is not a good organization, they're the implementers of deep state, let's say.
Really?
They've been working in the Ukraine for 70 years, building up a resistance to everybody and everything. Why? Because they needed to bring the Soviet Union.
To be fair, the KGB was working in the United States, and the episodes that we show, all the LGBTQ propaganda, that's part of the Soviet debasement of American society with the leftist Marxist views and destruction of the family. So yeah, eye for an eye.
Down, but they also want the resources that are in the Ukraine. That's what this is all about.
Tooth for a
Particularly
tooth.
Eastern Ukraine, massive natural resources that CIA goes in, gets control of, and American business interests, and they're not business, they're just robber barons. They're not legitimate businessmen. They just want to steal, and that's what goes on. And so they're taking that away from.
By the way, brothers and sisters, if you want to look into research and who runs it, you think the corporations is the only recent thing? Like, we just watched the videos about WF and how they control this, the walk credit score thing, the corporate equity index, and how it trickles down, and how they determine policies of nations through corporate influence of large corporations, right, on which nations depend upon. This is nothing new. Looking into Est Inc. and West Inc., those were big trading companies in 1800s, 1700s, and even 1900s, and they traded commodities like tobacco, opiates, hemp, cocaine, heroin, and other things. And I'm not joking. This is something very discoverable even on Google still. Like
anything to enrich the military-industrial complex,
and
right,
control the masses, right? Either brainwash them with the drugs or your Marxist views
from Russia and the Ukraine. And on top of that, it's the center of the deep state. And so by Vlad Putin going in, he's cutting the head off the snake. Once Ukraine goes down, because they've already taken out the capital of Kazakhstan. And if you want to have a look at what's weird, go look at the architecture in Kazakhstan. And tell me this is normal architectural buildings of a struggling.
Yeah, we're going to do that too. We're going to cover that. I think we're going to bring Melanie for this. Astana, which is the capital, sounds like a Satana, which is Satan, right? Is the capital of Kazakhstan. And it was recently built like in the middle of the desert, sort of like Las Vegas. It has a lot of Freemasonry feel to it. We're going to cover it with Melanie. I'm sure I'm going to ask her to do it. It's a fascinating subject.
But Ukraine, that's the head of the snake, and Vlad's taking the head off. Once the head comes off, the whole beast will die. So that's what's actually going on, folks. So please, they are going to tell you their stories about possible nuclear war, and Vlad's the bad man. This is the war with Russia that they wanted with Hillary Clinton as president. Because she lost, the whole war against Russia was postponed. This is the plan they always had, to destroy Russia, because they don't have a banking system that is under the Rothschilds. What a dangerous course of action that is. And they want.
Well, this is what we're talking about. This is exactly what it is. Russian interests are not controlled, and that's why, any kind of foreign influence, like in terms of media or any kind of compromised MPs. In Russia, we're actually going to have Vladimir Gudkov. Dmitry Gudkov. He's was official opposition to Putin's party. He's now in exile from Russia because I think he may be considered to be a foreign agent. I'd like to have him on the show, and I think I will, and we'll discuss those subjects with him. But that's what Russia is doing, is isolating itself from the influence of the organizations like WEF. At least it's what it presented to be. We'll see if that's the case. I don't know if BRICS is a good opposition to that, or is just like a sort of we'll call it a Russian feint.
To get a hold of the resources. This is them taking down. Anyway, so Vlad's taking down deep state. He's helping. He's cutting the head off the snake. So that's what's going on. So ignore all the chatter you're going to hear over the next little while about potential nuclear war and Russia's attempt to take over the globe. Completely the opposite. So that's the Ukraine, and so pay attention, but please do your own research. Don't, for goodness sake, don't watch mainstream media, because if their lips are moving, just like the politicians, if the media's lips are moving, they're lying.
Quite simple. Right to the point.
But what he said is very important. When somebody, like an example of, we always say that this country, a Western democracy, not this country, but Western countries, like Canada, US, EU, they're run by sociopaths and narcissists. Is that true, Glenn? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, bullseye.
Sociopaths, or maybe even psychopaths, right? And one of the traits sociopaths and psychopaths have is they gaslight. Gaslighting is when they reverse or project or tell you or completely deny, even if you see something that say the light is green and you can see it with your eyes, and they're like, no, the light is red. Or they'll project what they'll accuse you in something that they are doing themselves. And when Hillary Clinton will come out and say Putin is a Hitler and he's there to take over the world, and watch out, he's got nukes. And basically, she's saying that's what she wants to do. Glenn, is that true assessment?
Well, Hillary Clinton, she was part of the neocons who had an agenda to use the U.S. military and its allies to enforce the new rules of operation in the world to create a one world order, their new world order, which was towards a one world order. And I happen to believe that, they are being challenged and it's going down. It's a strange thing. When, let's say, Hillary Clinton was supposed to win, that was the one who they wanted in. But when she lost and Trump was in, we had no problems with Russia. We had no problems with North Korea. We had no problems with Xi of China. Everything was going well.
Till COVID.
And then, COVID, and then Biden so-called won. And now you see not only is it in Ukraine, but you also have problems starting in Kosovo, Serbia. You have problems starting North Korea, also China and Taiwan. So, they're purposely trying to make powder kegs around the world to deviate your attention from the real problem that's coming to a home near you. That's going to be economic, monetary, and fiscal problems.
Yeah. How they're doing it is they now remember just a few months ago we were focusing on China's the next target, Taiwan, the whole thing with Taiwan, and we can get into details with that. But now UK spy chief claims that Russia is a bigger threat. So somehow they changing the direction. Okay, China can wait. Russia is actually still a threat to us. And I don't know why they're escalating the war efforts now. Like we just heard it from Riccardo Bosi, the Australian guy. Why he thinks it's all happening, because it is very important for the globalists not to lose Ukraine, because then everything is getting exposed, all the weaknesses and all the agendas and everything else. And it's also, they have a lot invested into it. So, they're going all in. Medvedev, who Medvedev, he's the ex-Russian president, somewhere was between the Putin and Putin, right?
Now he's the prime minister of Russia.
So he actually, he's probably the most vocal regarding, this whole war and military action. And he says now Britain is de facto at war with Russia. This is his statement officially now. And he has a point, Glenn. UK now backs Ukraine terror attack. By the way, brothers and sisters, did you hear about that? Russia attacked the command centers in Ukraine. And as a result, Ukrainians sent the drones into Moscow, which would intercept it, but they did hit some civilian buildings as they were falling down. There was some, Putin said, we can do better, but there's something there. But there's a lot of escalations happening in the last few days, and people are being provoked. And one of the things is U.S. is being encouraging towards Ukraine to attack Russia. And, and Russia calls it for what it is. Russia says the West is backing terrorists in Kiev. Well, it's easy to accuse the Ukrainians, accuse Russians and being terrorists, and Russians accuse Ukrainians and being terrorists. But we know who sponsors terrorism. Who sponsors terrorism, Glenn? Who did officially sponsor terrorism in Afghanistan, for example? The American government that created the whole what's the Mujahideen? They created that to counter the Russians. In Ireland, they separated. For example, in Ireland, they created in Northern Ireland. They brought in the Scottish families to rule, the Scottish clans to rule the Irish, who hate each other from the from the start. Israel was created by UK. Right? What else? What else? Divide and conquer. Russia, Ukraine thing, divide and conquer.
But this has been going on for
Forever.
millennia. It's
It's
now
cool.
you can basically say what we always say is the rich old men start the wars, the poor young men and the women they fight them, and the middle class gets wiped out. And then there's a big rebuild that's going on. There's big money to be made in war, and unfortunately, though, there's a lot of big problems that people have to go through with a war. But the elites, they don't feel that. They just take more control, more power.
Do you think Quebec, Canada is divide and conquer too?
Yeah, I always believed that that was done purposely to weaken Canada, because Canada could have been a real big financial powerhouse because of all of our natural resources. I think Canada is being primed for the taking. Eventually, I see North America to stay relevant in the world. They're going to be like the EU did, where you're going to have a North American passport. Canada, United States, and Mexico. Canada for its natural resources, United States for its wealth and its military, and Mexico for its young population, huge and fantastic demographic for the future.
That's way good analysis. I don't know how to describe that. But as a result of the attack, the Kremlin outlined why Ukraine launched the attacks on Moscow. Tuesday failed drone raid on Moscow was an attempt to pay back by Kyiv for Russia's latest airstrike on Ukrainian decision-making centers, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has claimed. This comes after the Russian Defense Ministry reported that 8 plane-type UAV were shot down near the Russian capital. It's clear that we are talking about the response of the Kyiv's regime to blah, 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 all this other stuff. The interesting part is EU issues plea to Russia after Moscow drone attack. So the EU is saying, don't escalate. Obviously, EU now aware that the only thing I can recall and repeat is the strong call by the EU to Russia not to use such incidents as a pretext to further escalation of illegal aggression against Ukraine. By the way, remember the Argentina story in UK? Falkland Islands?
Falkland Islands, yeah.
You know what happened there? So what happened there, apparently, according to UK, the Falkland Islands had a referendum, legal referendum, and they are separated themselves from the Argentina. So it was a legal process, the will of the people. They said, we don't want to be part of Argentina, we want to be separate. Argentina said, no, that was a coup. It was sponsored by UK and all this other stuff. We smelled a rat. And obviously, they wanted to enforce it. So the UK actually flew across the Atlantic. They had a very special mission. They flew bombers and they flew tanker jets and all this other stuff, so they can have this long mission. And they attacked Argentina to protect Falkland Islands. Same thing happened in Crimea. Crimean people have spoken. The will of Crimean people. That was the referendum. It wasn't like the Russia came in with the tanks and took over. The Russia came in afterwards to protect the Crimea, according to the mainstream narrative of Russian Federation. And, it's what's good for the geese is not good for the gander, it seems like, with the West, in terms of we're there to protect the Western economy. But brothers and sisters, one thing we can tell you out of this, Glenn, right, is discern, do not buy into whatever media is trying to tell you. Don't buy into the fear. They're trying to scare you with all the nuclear wars and everything else that's going on. You can pray if you're afraid, but don't be afraid. Nothing is going to happen. Glenn, do you have any last-minute advice for the listeners? Because there's a lot of fear-mongering.
A very important advice, okay? This is to take your eyes off the real ball. Look in your micro markets where things are gearing up. The economy is going to go through a very rough time. Not to sound like a pessimist, more to sound like a realist, so you can be more prepared. There's going to be a big switchover. You can expect bankruptcies to increase. Going to be a lot of layoffs. There's going to be more people injured from certain, let's say, things that they were taking to prevent them from getting a bad cold. And all this is coming at the same time for something that's been thrown about a long time called the Great Reset. And before we get there, though, things are going to get a little dark, a little evil, a little bit of hell on earth.
Listen to the wisdom of Glenn Herring, brothers and sisters. Really focus to your micro markets. Really see what's going on in your neighborhood specifically. And you cannot affect what's happening in Ukraine, but trust me, you can impact what's happening in your neighborhood. On this note, brothers and sisters, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.